Hello, and welcome to the Outer Circle Inner Stillness, conversations around spirituality, sobriety, the sober way of life, spiritual disciplines, and how they all work together. Recently, I had the opportunity to travel up north to the Seattle area in Washington, in the Puget Sound on the coast, and get on a ferry, cross a foggy sea to Vashon Island. It is this delightful forested island up in the Puget Sound, and you get off the ferry and you drive up the road, and it's this winding road through fields, around the bay, up through hills, and you finally come to this long winding dirt driveway. Midway up, you pass the Orthodox 3-bar cross. It's this big red emblem nestled in the trees, and shortly thereafter you come up to a All Merciful Savior monastery, and it is this little cluster of tiny buildings. There's the chapel. It's like dark wood with a classic blue onion dome. There's these different cabins, the monks' cells, just brightly colored. This little tiny village of tranquility and beauty and peace nestled in the forest. And it's the most wonderful thing to go on this long journey, out of the city, through industry, across the sea, across the mountains, and then to come to this place of peace. And it's a really wonderful thing. If you're ever in that area, I highly recommend going to visit. But here at the monastery, Abbot Tryphon is the abbot, and he's the leader, the head monk there. Also a writer and speaker about Orthodox Christian thought. And I asked him if he would be open to sharing some thoughts and some wisdom about the Christian life. He has a long ago background in psychology, and he and I have talked a little bit about being a counselor and psychology and addictions and everything. And so I thought that bringing a monastic perspective to these conversations around spiritual practice, the sober way of life, about recovery, would be useful, if not interesting. So a couple of things to keep in mind for an episode like this. On a technical note, so there are some technological glitches just in the way that we filmed it. There will be a couple of moments where the image lags a little bit as I was learning how to do the setup. So the audio should still be good. So just hang tight through those moments and everything will be kind of smooth. On a content level, always keep in mind that the monastic life is very distinct and very different from lay people. Monastics, monks, nuns, they're these men and women who their primary vocation is to God, and they take themselves out of the world to gain clarity, to pray, to enter the stillness, to wage war with demons, and to come away more holy and with more insights. Not everyone can do this. And so as you listen to a monastic perspective, it's important to remember that it's not everything is going to translate neatly to our common everyday life. Most of us are not monastics. Most of us will not be monastics. So there always has to be a little bit of that translation that goes on. Also, Abbot Tryphon in particular, he's a storyteller. And so there's a flavor to how he conveys his truths and his information, in that there's a lot of story. And so it's different than how we might learn in a classroom, because it's not necessarily here's a set of linear facts. Learning from a story is like learning through metaphor. You have to be in it and experience it. So keeping those things in mind, that we're venturing far out of the world to learn some perspectives that are in a way extreme, because they're monastic. So they're not going to be a complete fit for what we do, but there's still insight there. You step away from your life to gain perspective on it. And so there are valuable things that we can learn. There are valuable perspectives that we can benefit from. At the very least, valuable perspectives that are worth pondering to some degree. And there's a lot of good stories, and it's really good to feel a truth, to experience the truth, even if you don't know it with your intellect right away. That doesn't mean it's not true. That doesn't mean you're not benefiting from it. It's just a very different way of knowing. So then, thank you for listening. And here's a series of interviews, and I hope that you are greatly enriched by it. Thank you. I'm thinking about how a lot of addictions, whether it's alcohol or cannabis or ecstasy or pornography, or in a sense even like eating too. I mean, eating is a very sensory thing, but they're all means of disconnecting myself from myself, or disconnecting myself from the world, and definitely from people, and absolutely from the Holy Spirit. So being able to now step into this very embodied experience where, and like we were talking about relationships earlier, I'm both connected with people and I'm connecting to myself in really powerful ways. Mm-hmm. So let me ask you this. And let's say I'm one of these people. Yes, I am also in recovery, but so I'm a young person and I'm wrestling with pornography. I'm engaging in sexual acts that I don't want to much more often than is good for me, or I'm smoking cannabis way too much. I mean, some people might say smoking it at all is not good. That's fair too. But in some sense, I'm caught up in the cycle. I'm drinking too much, smoking too much, watching too much TV, something, and I know, and I have access to the Orthodox faith. And I would say, Abbot Tryphon, help me. I want to get better. What should I be doing or thinking differently or feeling differently to set myself on a healing journey?
Well, again, I think when we look at that we are creatures of the senses, and I know that years ago when I was teaching, there was a rash of young men who were accidentally hanging themselves while masturbating in order to have this extra sensation. And it became such a problem that colleges in the area were all the psychologists in the area were all talking about it. What can we do to stop this? Today, I asked a former colleague of mine a few years ago, do you still have that issue? And he said, no, it's something different. And the new issue is erectile dysfunction. And it's because young men are using the internet and they have such easy access to it that every time they are masturbating, they're looking at a different image with a different person in a different scenario and so on. And what that ends up doing is ultimately they're left with erectile dysfunction with their wife because they're used to having somebody different each time. And so I think it's the same way with food addiction and drink and so on. A good habit to get into, if somebody is, say, socially with their friends and they're going out to dinner and everybody's gonna have a cocktail, limit it to one. Make it an absolute, I will not have a second drink, period. And that goes with a bottle of wine at the dinner table. Have one glass of wine and that's it. No more for yourself, and make that an absolute. If you're going to be out after work with some colleagues and they're all going to have a martini, have one martini and sip on it slowly so that you're not having them pushing you or pressuring you to have a second one. Oh, you're finished. Let's get you another one,
Yeah, that feels like a really reasonable approach to something like drinking. Not necessarily necessary to cut it out altogether if one can have a more reasonable relationship with it. And it seems like the relationship to the substance becomes a big factor. To have one drink and to sip on it feels like a very relaxed, non-desperate, maybe even a non-functional relationship with the thing, versus I need it in me as fast as I can because I rely on this thing to regulate something in me. would be a much different relationship. So how would you say, if I am drinking too much because it has emotional function for me, and I want to make the journey to, I don't need it, I don't need that same sort of relationship, how do you make that shift?
I think part of the problem is that people have too much time on their hands. And I think that if someone is addicted to, well, I'll give you an example of something that is very was shocking for me when I first heard that Oregon had legalized all drugs. And so is it any wonder that one can't walk down a street in downtown Portland without seeing somebody jabbing themselves because it's legal? They can't be arrested. It's the same way as is when somebody attacks another person on the street, and they get away with it essentially because if they are arrested, it's probably within an hour they're going to be released. That is absolute madness. That's why we have police forces. That's why we care about how we're interacting with other people and what we're doing for them. If we have, say, I remember when I was in college, I traveled with a bunch of friends from Oregon to California, and we stopped in for an overnight at one of my friend's parents' home. And my friend was addicted to pot, and he was always smoking pot. He was always stoned. When we got to his parents' home, I immediately knew why, because his mom and dad were alcoholics. I mean, obviously alcoholics. I don't remember how many they had, but in the short evening we spent before we all turned in, his parents drank a lot of martinis. And so the image that they were giving to their son was, it's all right. Everything's fine. In fact, he even told me that his parents had no problem with him being a pot smoker. They saw it as similar to what they were doing. Well, it was. It was very similar, and in a very detrimental way. And certainly, addictions are not always easy, and sometimes it's really necessary that one gets therapy and as I said earlier, and they work through it with a therapist who understands what they're going through and where their weaknesses are. But it's like that young man that I told, you need to do a 40-minute run every day. That's what got me through a lot. I would go running, and it's hard to go running and then fall into depression. It's sort of like it knocks it out of you. And I remember times when I would take the train from Portland to Vancouver, British Columbia, and I'd stay in an inexpensive hotel that was right next to Stanley Park. And every morning I would get up and I would run around Stanley Park. It's a huge park. I can barely walk a quarter of it now, but I would run around Stanley Park. I'd go back to my hotel room, shower, and hit the road, and I would spend the rest of the day wandering around Gaslight Town and other parts of Vancouver. I knew that city backwards and forwards because I walked everywhere. I saw things everywhere I went that were enjoyable. Mm-hmm. And it's the same way when I would go to Cannon Beach, Oregon to run. One of my favorite places to run was Multnomah Falls. I would go park there, and I would go up I would run up the switchbacks into that primordial forest, and it was just an incredible experience for me, and it took away. During those years, I didn't suffer from depression. I didn't suffer from anxiety. And I always felt super good and energized. And I think, too, this addiction that a lot of people have, not only to the internet, but television, you know, there's something really healing about entering into the silence. And one of my favorite things to do, and I love doing this because I love road trips. I love alone road trips where there's nobody with me and I'm just driving. And my favorite place, whenever I have to go to San Francisco for pastoral conferences, I go down I-5 to get there as fast as I can. But when I leave, I drive up 101 slowly, and I stay 2 nights on the road. Not one night, 2 nights, which gives me this opportunity to really take in the coast. One of my favorite places is Yachats. I love Yachats. I love the Adobe Hotel in Yachats, it's Yachats' temperature is so mild throughout the year that they don't even have air conditioning in that hotel. They don't need it. And I remember the last time I stayed there, it was summertime, and I opened the windows of my hotel room. And as I'm drifting off to sleep, I'm hearing the crashing of the waves. And then I wake up in the morning and I hear seagulls. I mean, it didn't get any better than that.
That sounds so perfect.
Oh, it was perfect. And another thing that I do when I'm driving up the coast is I have my favorite places to stop. Points of view, that one where I can't remember what it's called, but it's that lighthouse that sits way out with a big house near it, and you're way over here looking over at it, and I take my iPhone and I take all kinds of pictures, and then I go a little further and I go down under the tunnel, go through the tunnel and around, and I go down on the beach that looks up at it. And I just find myself a little spot to sit on a piece of driftwood. And I just sit there in silence and let God speak to me through the sound of the waves. And even though I will on occasion listen to music when I'm driving, if I do that, I listen to music that is sort of like the background for a movie. It's soothing, ambient type music, But the rest of the time, I had the vehicle that we have, this Toyota SUV that somebody donated to the monastery, and it's the nicest vehicle I've ever driven. And I was driving one day on the island. I just felt like I needed to get out and just sort of unwind, get away from my work here and everything that was going on. So I got in that vehicle, and as I'm driving, I'm looking up, and I'm thinking we've got this big top window that opens all the way, and from both the front seat to the back seat. And I opened that thing, and then I thought, I wonder what it would be like if all the windows were down while I'm doing this. So I put all the windows down. I felt like I was driving around in a convertible. It was just wonderful. All this breeze coming through, and the air, the freshness of the whole thing, and driving through some of the forested roads on the island. By the time I got back, I actually came back earlier than I expected because I didn't need to do it anymore because of what it was doing for me. And I think when we think about what life was like maybe 100 years ago in this country, or even 50 years ago, most people had experiences like that. When I was a little kid, I remember on Sunday afternoons after church, we'd all get in the car, and my dad would drive us around in the countryside around Spokane, and we'd go visit sites of, where there had been a native village, or old houses, museums, just driving around in the countryside. And when I was going to college at Mount Angel College in Oregon, the Willamette Valley, I used to get in my 58 Volvo and put the windows down and just drive around in the countryside, fantasizing, oh, what if I owned that horse ranch and I was a professor, and I had a professor that actually did own a horse ranch, and once in a while she would have her classes at her home. And I remember once when I was driving to her place and she came riding up on her horse, and she had those sort of British looking riding horse, I don't know what you call those things, the big,
Yeah. The riding pants.
and she had a riding cap on, and she comes riding up there, and and it's like I never looked at her the same after that. It was like, wow, she's right out of England, out of from an estate even, you know. And so I used to like that idea, but even if one lives in a city, there are things that one can do. When I was living in the Bay Area, I taught at a small private high school as a monk in a private Catholic high school in Berkeley. And there were times when after a day of work and I'm kind of wiped out and feel a little stress coming on, and I would get in the car and I would drive over to across the East Bay Bridge, and I would go up in the mountains there and hike. And it was a wonderful experience, and it was a time when I found myself meditating as I was walking and saying the prayer rope, and I'd come back renewed for another week. All it took was one of those days. And there's so many things, even if you don't have access to a vehicle, you can always get a city bus and go to a beautiful big park in your town. And even if nothing else, walk to a park bench and sit there and just take it in. Mm-hmm. Take in the trees, take in the breeze.
One of the things that I'm appreciating about this is, in a sense, like the non-mysterious nature of this, and that like there's not this magic silver bullet or this miracle drug or like miracle breathing technique that will like solve your addiction problem. Like there's a lot of things like you're saying, like exercise or body movement, time outside, mm-hmm. time with friends. Yeah, not everyone has access to beautiful beaches, but most people can get outside or have some way of like getting around a tree or a bush or something, or out under the open sky. And I'm appreciating the way that there, it's these kind of common, easy to access experiences like moving your body, like encountering the senses. A lot of this seems like the recovery journey becomes kind of a process of discovery. I'm discovering my body, discovering my senses, discovering the environment, discovering relationships, discovering knowing and being known by another person, and discovering that doesn't that's, if it's done well, it doesn't hurt you, and in fact helps you quite a bit.
I remember when I was in my early 20s, I wanted to be a poet. And I thought, well, the best place to go would be Greenwich Village, New York, because all my favorite poets, I was really into the beat poets at the time, even though I was too young to be a beat poet. The age of the hippies had already overpowered me. But I went to Greenwich Village because a lot of my favorite poets had lived in Greenwich Village. A few still lived in Greenwich Village. And I remember going to the McDougall Street Coffee House, which was a classic place. It's no longer there, unfortunately. It's now an Italian restaurant. But I would go there and just hang out over a cappuccino, but not too far from there. And I think it was, I want to say Columbia Square or something. There was a huge park nearby. that had kind of a circular area, and it had I think there might have been a fountain there. I don't remember now. It's been so long. But there were a whole series of park benches. And every time I would walk through there, I would see all these people just sitting there out in a park. It was a New York City park. It wasn't the same. If you wanted even more of that, you could go into Central Park and walk that. But it was healing, and this little apartment that I shared with some people was a horrible place. It was the only thing I could afford, and it was a horrible place. And the only way that I was able to survive my 7 months in Greenwich Village with my sanity intact was when I would go out and go to one of the parks, or go spend a day walking through Golden Gate Park and looking at the lake and watching people and watching horse buggies go by with tourists. It put my mind in a proper perspective about what life is really supposed to be about. Because the idea that our life is all about rush here and rush there and rush home so I can go to my room to watch my movie on my laptop away from my family. Even some families that don't even eat together anymore. Oh, there's a buffet in the kitchen. Go help yourself. Take it to your room if you like. I mean, what does that do?
Yeah, there does seem to be this sense that the true self is the calm self, and that like the true reality is like the slower reality. Or by becoming calm, by slowing down, that is when I become able to perceive truth and to perceive the real thing, and to really truly know myself. Like, my authentic self isn't this thing that I want to do, or this thing that feels most natural or comfortable, or this thing that gets me excited, as much as like the authentic me is me when I'm calm, me when able to slow down, be connected, be present with the world around me, the people around me. Because I'm not just like this isolated individual. Like, I'm very integrally designed to be connected, and when I'm interconnected and slow and calm, then I'm my real self.
And I think that everyone can say that of themselves. And again, most people in this day don't seem to be in touch with that inner self. It's all about what's going on out there. It's all about their job. It's about their family. It's about getting together with friends. It's about going to a bar. And it's like, I remember when I was still a runner, and I decided, wouldn't it be cool to have a running organization? So I founded a runners group. And my idea was going up into Forest Park in Portland and running with, 4, 5, 6, 12 other people. And so here I'm the founder of this runners club. And I went once, and I knew what was missing. It wasn't running, it was solitude. I had no solitude because I was with all these people. So I went to that one. I don't know whether the thing continued or not. I didn't care. I knew that this is not what I could do. I remember one of the people that joined the runners group, and he was this, my gosh, the guy was driven. It was like, if I don't run really hard and with all my energy, I will be a ruined mess at the end. And so for him, it was more like work. Like, oh, I've got all this work to do before I get finished to go home. I got to get this done. I got to get this done. And that's not what I see running is about. Running is that moment, like when I would go running up the switchbacks at Multnomah Falls. It was probably the most relaxing, centering thing I could have done during that time. My favorite time to run in Wildwood Park was when it was the winter, because it would be raining and no one else is up there, and I'm up there alone running a 28-mile hike, a mile trail alone. I mean, I loved it.
Something I want to call attention to a little bit is kind of like that again, the balance of things. We've talked about it's really essential to be able to slow down, to calm down, to sit on a bench, to sit on a log by the beach, and kind of appreciate the nature of nature. But at other times, it's also really essential to do these big movements, do these really high energy sorts of things, and like really like exert and put rigor on your body. Just like at some point, it's really essential, like we talked a lot about in our last conversation, like the vitality of being with people and connecting and having relationships. But you're also talking about at other times, it's just as important to also have some solitude, to be alone, to go into yourself. And so, and you do in our last conversation too, we both talked about here's like the evils of technology and social media, but also here's how we still engage with social media to be a good presence or to use it in a way. So I'm inferring this theme, and you could correct me if I'm wrong with that. A lot of life is balances, and having kind of this flexible approach that can allow for there's a cyclic nature. There's different extremes, and kind of going in the cycle of like alone time, together time, calm time, active time, and finding for each individual the particular balance of them that works for them, and recognizing there are going to be multiple modes that a person falls into. But if you, there's not just like this autopilot, like here's what I do and
Yep.
I run every day and that's it.
Yeah. I think that what we don't want to do is we don't want to turn exercise, whether it's bodybuilding or running, into a business or a career. It's not, because then we defeat the whole purpose of it. I remember once a woman told me that she says, I have no time alone. I've got 4 kids. I work part-time. I don't have any time alone. And I said, do you pray alone? And she said, well, we do as both a family, and I pray alone. And I said, where do you do that? And she said, well, I have some icons in the bedroom. And I said, do you ever have your kids knock on the door or come in to the room looking for you? Oh, mommy, can I have a cookie? She said, a lot. And so I suggested to her that she empty a closet. I said, take the nicest, biggest closet you have that's down the hall, not in your room, and not near the living room, and take everything out and build a miniature little chapel in there. Have a table with candles burning, a lampada lit or more, and put all your icons in there, your family icons, and then put a sign on the door that is a switching sign, so that when you're in there and you want that solitude, your sign says silence. And your children are instructed, if you see the sign silence, do not knock on that door. Do not open the door unless it is an absolute emergency. And she started doing that. And I think everybody should do something like that. I have in my monastic cabin, I found it at in an antique store. It was on sale because the price was, it's a table about this wide and probably 4 feet long, and it's made out of steel, so it's very heavy. And I saw this in this store that was going out of business. And so I asked her the price, and it was way more than I could afford. So when she realized I was probably the only person that was going to ever buy the darn thing, she reduced the price drastically. And I brought it home, and I covered it up with liturgical cover, and I have 2 candles there, and all my icons are there, and and I have holy water there. I have myrrh from the myrrh streaming icons. Everything is there that I need, and a lampada. And every morning when I get up, I light my lampadas in my room. First thing I do is make my bed. Because I remember once, I think he was the head of the Marines. Did you see that?
I did see the video. Yeah.
Oh,
it was
yes.
inspiring.
I mean, I thought, that's what I need to do.
Yeah.
I need to make my bed every day.
It's kind of a famous piece of recovery advice, like at least make your bed. It's like these little points of like ordering your day that build into more
You say, I love that thing. I passed that around.
Yeah.
And so here I am. I get up, I make my bed, I light my lampadas, and then my day begins. I do that before I shower. I do that before I even have a cup of coffee. I mean, that's how desperate I am at that moment. And but when I light the lampadas, my very first prayer of the day is, I'm remembering people that have requested my prayers, and I'm lighting the lamp, and I'm asking God to bless them, etc. So I am, the beginning of my day is focused in my faith. And, you know, over the years, I've known so many Orthodox Christians that, you know, maybe they have an icon of Christ in the bedroom, but they don't have any others. I've explained to people that when you have a wall of icons in your living room, or an icon corner, which is traditional with Slavs, and you light the lamp, first thing, light the lamp, because that is a reminder that you are in the presence of God. No matter what's going on around you, you're house cleaning, you're vacuuming, you're tending to the kids, that lampada reminds you and everyone else in your family that God is present. And when we do stuff like that, it's because it takes the spiritual down to the physical level where we are. We're actually activating our physical self in the process of making our day focused on God. Most people, because they're busy with their jobs, they're busy with, the children, they're busy with stuff that requires their undivided attention, it's hard for them to pray or be spiritual throughout the day. But those are those moments where, well, it's like when monks, are working in a garden, they're saying the Jesus prayer. Because it's the importance of work and prayer together.
Because it's not like an emotion-based prayer where like it's a good prayer. If I really feel it, if I really believe it, it's a good prayer. It's not like that. It's more if I'm doing it in obedience and in faith that my obedience counts for something, then it becomes effective.
I remember once a evangelical minister confided in me that he was going through a dry period and he wasn't able to pray. And when I talked to him about prayer, what are you talking about? What are you saying you're having difficult time doing? What it really got down to was he was having, with all the other stuff going on in his life, he wasn't able to focus emotionally in prayer. And so for him, unless he was like, praise Jesus, and feeling it. But, it's like an elderly couple that have been married for 55 years, and they're sitting together on the sofa. They're not talking. Maybe they're just sitting there holding hands in silence. I've seen that numerous times when I've gone to visit old people or gone to care centers and seen that happen. They don't need to. And it's not like we have to be wordy with God. This is one of the things that I love about the Jesus prayer is, that when we say, Lord Jesus Christ, we're recognizing that Jesus is the Christ, the Messiah, have mercy. We're recognizing that as God, he has the ability to have mercy on us. And then we know as Orthodox Christians that the word mercy isn't just about don't hit me. The word mercy is, when we're asking God for his mercy, it means we're asking for the air we breathe, the water we drink, the food we eat, the friends we have, the family we have. It's everything comes from God. And so that's what really makes a gigantic difference in how we interact with God. It's not about being wordy. I mean, the scriptures make it clear that God heard our prayers even before he created us. Now, go figure.
Right.
I mean, he's all-knowing. And do we think we need to spell it out?
Yeah, prayer is not about a data transfer or anything.
Yeah.
It's this
Or who are we to tell God what to do? You know? I mean, it's better. This is what I love about the Jesus prayer. There's also arrow prayers that are short prayers that can be said repetitively from the heart. One of my favorite ones is, God, dispel my darkness. God, dispel my darkness. Or no, God, dispel the darkness. God, dispel the darkness. Because we are surrounded by temptations. We're surrounded by, we go through these moments of doubt about our faith, about God's existence. But when we enter into either an arrow prayer or the Jesus prayer, it's not requiring us to be emotional. And even, some people say, the Orthodox Church's services are all liturgical and it's all a bunch of, somebody said to me once, I don't understand how you guys think you have to say 40 Lord have mercies in your service. And that's when I said, do you know what the word mercy means? Well, I'm asking God not to strike me down or something. I said, that's not what it means at all. And so the more we say, Lord have mercy, Lord have mercy, Lord have mercy, we are recognizing that everything that comes to us is from God. Everything. Even suffering. Even when we're suffering. If we offer up our suffering, I'm not complaining to God about the pain that I've been under with my hips. I'm seeing it as an opportunity to join myself to my co-suffering Savior who suffered on the cross for me. And so, it's sort of like suffering comes with old age. I mean, whenever I get together with old friends, we're always talking about medical stuff, Oh, my back is killing me, and oh, my knee is going out, stuff like that. But the difference between those of my friends who are devout Christians and others is that it isn't a complaint. It is an embracing the co-suffering Savior who's with us on this, because suffering is salvific. God allows suffering as a salvific thing for us. And I think the problem that a lot of Christians have is that since their prayer is so based on emotion, that when they're not feeling the emotion, then they start doubting the existence of God.
That feels like a key point in a lot of levels, whether it's my relationship to God, my relationship to my own sobriety, my married relationship, my committed relationship, if that's a thing for me. A lot of times it is based on feeling or a felt sense of conviction, rather than this is a value, this is a chosen practice, and just because I'm not feeling the feelings doesn't make it a bad marriage or a bad faith. Just because I don't feel excited about sobriety doesn't mean I'm failing at it, and it doesn't mean I should quit it either. It's there. The reality is that these things are good for us to strive at, to work hard at, and it's not. It seems like the turning point or the distinction between people who can thrive here and not is people who can keep doing a thing, suspending the need for feelings, or kind of regardless of what they're feeling, either recognizing here's the benefit for me in the moment, or here's the vision I'm pursuing in the future. That seems to make a really big difference.
I think it's sort of like going back to the elderly couple sitting there with their holding hands and saying nothing. That couple have gone through so many things in their lives, including painful times, poverty, perhaps, wondering how are we going to eat. My husband just lost his job. All kinds of things, or watching their teenagers ruin their lives, and but it's that stability of their love for each other that ultimately leads them into an old age that is full of maybe aches and pains, but it's full of joy. And, it's for me, because I have such a passion for helping young men, especially that come here. I was watching a Zoom thing the other day of 4 or 5 young men from around the country who were have this. I think I called it, mentioned earlier, but patristic faith podcast. And they're dialoguing. They're living in different places. So each one of them, you see, he's in a different environment than the other one. But they're having this common time together. And they're all faith-oriented. And they're all concerned about what's going on in our society and the falling of our, maybe of the democracy itself. We don't know. But I look at these guys and I feel so much solidarity with them. And then I know that at least one of them, because I heard him in his own podcast, refer to, old people as boomers. And, he kind of like dismissed the boomers. And it was all about young men gathering together to work through this spiritual struggle together and so on. And I kept thinking, boomer, boomer, boomer. And then I looked it up and I went online and Googled boomer, and I escaped that because I'm a year or two older than the boomers. So I actually, when I was at MontanaCon, and one of my lectures, I started off by saying, just so you know, I am not a boomer. I'm 2 years older than the boomers. But that it is that almost magic of this male bonding that we need. Part of the problem that we have today too is we recognize the importance of women having their clubs, women having their little
their cliques. Cliques, clubs, gatherings,
of clubs, getting together and with their girlfriends. We understand the importance of that, but we, at the same time, we're so politically correct that we want to put to end men's clubs. So, if there's an organization that's always been open only to men, like say Rotary was originally a men's organization. And then people decided, there's women who are business people too, and they need to have this interaction. And so, let's change that. Well, it can be a good thing. But what it's ignoring is that in the makeup of us as humans, it was the men that were the warriors and the men that would go out to hunt the elk. And it was the women who were, tending the campfire and making the food for the family. And then we go into more modern times like the 50s, and we see that was the given for, I can't remember any friends when I was a kid in Spokane. I can't remember anyone that when it was dinner time wasn't sitting around the table with their family. I can't remember that. And now it's a rarity. Kids come home, and when they hear mom calling them for dinner, or dad, and they come out, and 9 times out of 10, they're allowed to take their plate to their room to continue with whatever they're doing in their room. And so what is happening is that the very important setting for young people, children, to learn how to be truly human is missing. And so is it any wonder that when they go off to college or to high school even, that they're given over to to their phones and text messaging, or going to a coffee house. Coffee houses, from the beginning of the coffee houses, were places where people gathered together to share ideas. They don't do that anymore. Even when they're with their best friend, they don't do that anymore. Mm. And we as a society, we need to put an end to that, and we need to return to the roots of what it means to be a human. Mm. And what's important to be in this process of being truly human is we share ourselves with other people. It's not like, oh, I'm going to text message you a note and then send you a picture that I just took a selfie. Don't care whether I'm in the room or not. That's not what I'm talking about. It's about getting together and sharing. Mm-hmm. Getting together with I know that one of my old friends, when I picked him up in Portland and taking him out to have a bite to eat in a restaurant, or maybe even going to a coffee house or something. And I remember one case where I was with my friend Paul, and we were in a nice restaurant in Portland, and the waiter, this young man, came up, and Paul made a comment to him about how Father Tryphon and I have been friends since our college days. And that when he tried to get together at least every 2 or 3 months to have some time together like this. And I didn't think that this young man got it. Mm-hmm. There was just something that about his I had the sense that it went in one ear and out the other because he couldn't relate to it. Mm-hmm.
Couldn't relate to long friendships, or couldn't relate to
couldn't relate to the fact that when friends get together, they have this kind of bond like this. Okay. But when I was in college, that was a big thing. My best friend in college, Russell, died of cystic fibrosis when he was 56. He was my age, so he would be 77 now. And so when he died, he had become Orthodox. And Father Andrew Letton and I did the funeral. His wife at the time, she wasn't going to have a funeral service in a church. She was just going to have a gathering at a gallery where he showed his work. And so when I found out, I said, well, his priest, Father Nicholas at the time, and I are going to do a service for him at Holy Apostles in Northwest Portland. And I said, we'd love to have you, and we'd love to have his friends. It's up to you if you want to put it in the newspaper that this is going to happen. But regardless, it will happen, and when it's over with, we will join you at the Greystone Gallery. And so she ended up putting it in the paper. So the church was full of his friends. And I can remember one woman came up to me and she was sort of surprised that we were doing a service in an Orthodox church for Russell. She didn't know he'd become Orthodox. But what I really sensed when she was saying that was she was surprised that he was religious, because I didn't think that most people there were. And when we look at how we as humans have allowed the tech world, the tech industry, to change us, to intrude on what it really means to be human. You know, I can remember one of my most enjoyable times ever when I was in college was when a bunch of us turned an old bread truck into kind of a hippie truck, and we drove up the coast. First time I'd ever seen the Pacific Ocean, and we drove up the coast and we hugged a redwood together. I've got a picture of myself in my study hugging that very redwood that we all hugged together. And it was that same trip that when we got to San Francisco and we discovered Cafe Trieste, which is my favorite coffee house anywhere. But before we went in there, we were about a half a block up from Trieste on Grant Street, and I saw this men's clothing store, British clothing store. And we went in, and this was like probably 1969. And so you can imagine that a men's clothing store that was British in North Beach, which was kind of the haven for the beatniks initially. It was the clothing in there was what rock stars would wear, and what British rock stars in particular would wear. So I still remember how shocked I was when we walked out of that place and I was wearing $70 worth of clothes, and that was a lot of money back then. I had these flared bell bottoms. I had this sport coat that to this day was my favorite. It had a belt, short lapels. It was kind of a tweed-looking material, and I got a silk shirt with big, it came out to here, and a silk scarf. And we're walking out of there, and we're standing waiting to cross the street into Cafe Trieste. And this couple from the Midwest ran across the street asking for my autograph. They thought I was John Lennon. In my study, I actually should show this before you leave.
Yeah.
I have this photo that Russell took of me in Golden Gate Park. And you can see off in the distance a bunch of hippies way down in the past, and I'm walking there, and I'm wearing this outfit. And looking at that picture, his son has been going through 14,000 photographs of Russell, because he was a professional photographer, and then passing it around to Russell's old friends, including myself, to say, oh, that's who this person is here, and this is where this happened. And so there was a lot of pictures of that old truck. And there was one of when a bunch of us are sitting on top of it, having our picture taken by the San Francisco Chronicle. They did an article about us being there. And I'm sitting up there literally looking like John Lennon. And on that same trip, we went to a restaurant called Alioto's on Fisherman's Wharf, and we're sitting there, and some things you'll never forget, and I'll never forget this. The waiter came up, and he says, "My name is Saint, and I will be your waiter tonight." So we were eating dinner, and then the waiter comes up with a menu, and this was like a hard-backed menu, a fancy menu. And he said, "Excuse me, I know you are not John Lennon, but there's a couple over there who are absolutely convinced you are John Lennon. It would mean the world to them if you would sign the menu. And so all my friends said, don't sign it John Lennon like you did in front of the Cafe Trieste. So I signed it with my given name. And later, when we were paying the bill and leaving, the waiter told me, he says, you're going to never believe this, but those people think they were the only people in the world who know John Lennon's real name.
Oh, that's awesome. So John Lennon was a wizard. He would be Abbot Tryphon, so, which is references to the Gandalf stories, which we might save for a different time.
Yeah.
I might wrap it there. I started with this inquiry around like, so when one is addicted to something or endeavoring to go on this recovery journey, I like the way that it's kind of come out. A lot of themes around, again, making the journey to discover yourself, making the journey to encounter other people, making the journey to really participate in some really active, lively ways in being with people and being active in the world and making memories and trying to cultivate long-term friendships. And a lot of things that, probably aren't going to show up in the addiction medicine science book, but become part of the way of life. Like addiction recovery isn't just about I'm stopping doing all of these things that are bad for me. That's not always the hard part for people. The hard part is like, okay, I'm 3, 5, 10 years into it. What's my life about? And I feel like what you're able to point to is like a lot of accounts of like, here's a full life, or here's an actively engaged participatory life, something to aspire after, in whatever individual circumstance you might be in. So thank you. Thank you very much for...
It was a joy.
It's a great portrait of a life, and it's great to hear some stories. And now I know John Lennon's real name too. Thank you.